regular season games due to the injury. On the Packers side of things, Quay Walker, Evan Williams, Romeo Doubs, and Brenton Cox were all back at practice, at least on a limited basis. So too was Jordan Love, who missed much of the final 3 quarters against the Bears with an elbow injury. Meanwhile, Packers coach Matt LaFleur and his staff preparing to face NFL's leading rusher in Saquon Barkley.
Obviously, the season he's had is, he's dynamic, and he hurt us when we played him the first game of the season in terms of not only running the ball, but he cut a rail route out of the backfield. So he's a guy that you absolutely have to have eyes on, have vision on, and making sure that you have a plan for him.
As LaFleur noted, going to be the second matchup between the two teams this year, with Philly winning the first back in week 1. Kick on Sunday is set for 3:30. A Packers win would send them to face the Lions in the next round. Turning to Wisconsin, they made the move of Kenny Guyton from wide receivers coach to quarterbacks coach official this morning.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Farmers deal with a lot, including long days and fatigue. This is your reminder: breaks, stretch, have a snack, and hydrate your body. Avoid farm accidents by keeping yourself healthy. Visit ruralmutual.com to learn how Rural Mutual supports Wisconsin farmers and prioritize safety on the farm.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
It'll be the Bucks and Spurs tonight at Fiserv Forum. Chris Middleton not going to be in the starting lineup anymore, as Coach Doc Rivers has decided to bring him off the bench. Tip is set for 8:30. And Wisconsin getting ready to face Minnesota coming up on Friday. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil.
It's a disappointing finish, disappointing loss. It's the same thing. There's a lot of areas that we can clean up and we got to be better on. And the same kind of messages going through that locker room is, we got to go out there and make these plays and execute. We just have to be better.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
A lot of important questions and answers in Green Bay today, as much as you get in press conferences at least, on the status of Jordan Love and his elbow, and I guess Malik Willis as well, right, who's banged up. He was limited today, too. Both quarterbacks limited. So I'll share the limited remarks that Matt LaFleur had about that. Jordan Love answered questions with a little bit more detail about what happened to his elbow and how he's feeling and how that injury has progressed. He didn't give away state secrets or anything, but he certainly shared more than Matt LaFleur did, which isn't surprising. But it would seem the Packers living up to the moniker that Bill Michaels has always used, Red China, right? Matt LaFleur really high and tight with injury information. And I guess you can get a little bit of a competitive advantage. I guess. I think these coaches, too, they just, as soon as they get, and I've said this time and time again, you've heard me say this, when these guys get a chance to be a head coach, it's like, finally, I can withhold information from the media. Like, that's, I get to, call plays and lead meetings and, be on a sideline. But really, a big part of this job, it would seem for lots of these coaches, like, finally, I can be a prick to the media and refuse to answer their questions. It's just ingrained in these guys. So I'll give you the latest on that. That's where we'll begin tonight. Another fairly loaded show. We're kind of white hot with guests this week. Tom Kelly from Sports Radio WIP in Philly is going to join us at 4:30 in about a half hour. Classic Eye on the Enemy. I mean, where would local sports talk radio be if we couldn't do an Eye on the Enemy segment going into a game? He hosts in the evenings. He also does the halftime show because WIP is the flagship for the Eagles. He's got a podcast as well. I'll make sure to pass that along when the time comes if you want to find more of his work. And I hope that you do. Follow him on Twitter and support him. Thank him for coming on the show. I was on his show last evening. So I said, look, no obligation, no pressure, but if you want to do a home and home, I'd love to have you on tomorrow so you can give the Eagles side of this matchup. So we'll do that in about a half hour. Jesse Temple's going to be here at 5:30 as he is most Wednesdays. Sometimes we do that at 4:30, but 5:30 typically is when Jesse makes his weekly Badger appearance. He covers the Badgers for The Athletic, and you hear him on the camp and the swing as well. Some actually very significant Badgers news this afternoon. If you are following, if you're a Badger football fan that watches the game on Saturdays, and it starts and ends there, this isn't going to be earth-shattering to you, but if you're someone who follows the program in a lot more detail, which I know I'm sure most of you do, and you're watching, players hitting the transfer portal, players coming and going, Ricardo Hallman, who might have been their best player on defense last year, announced this afternoon that he's coming back for a 5th season, which is huge because they lost a lot of players out of that secondary, and they still have a lot of work to do building up the corner position and replenishing that defensive backfield, but when you can do it around a guy like Ricardo Hallman, right, you're in a lot better spot. So that's a huge story. And if there's any information, Jesse posted a story about it 2 minutes ago. I haven't had a chance to pop it open and read it. But if there's any pressing information that Badgers fans must know, I will get that to you after our first commercial break. Because that's significant news, right? It's not weighted like Packers-Eagles playoff game, but that's a huge piece that the Badgers are going to get back for next season, especially at a position where they've lost a lot of bodies, depth bodies, and a guy who is probably going to start like Xavier Lucas, who's now embroiled in a legal battle. But Ricardo Hallman coming back, that's huge. So I wanted to make sure that you do that right from the rip, and I'll pass along any information or any comments or anything that I can find. I'll pass that along to you. I'd love to take your calls. That much never changes, even when we have guests and breaking news. 608-321-1670, the number, and you can comment on the live stream, YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter as well, at Wisco Grant. The show live streams there, and you can tweet me during the show too. The latest on Jordan Love. It could be better. It could also be worse. Things could always be worse. It's an important lesson with sports. Things could always be worse. He warmed up. If you were paying attention to Packers practice today, because they had yesterday off, they're back on the practice field today. And if you were waiting from tweets and updates from the Packers beat, what you would have seen is them saying, well, Jordan Love's warming up with the team, but then they ushered the media out before drills or before actual practice. Typically, the media, the way I understand it, and Mike Clemens would have to correct me here if I'm wrong, but I think the way that it works is you watch warmups and then you watch some individual drills. And then when the actual serious practice begins, that's when the media is ushered out and the doors are closed. So from what I am reading, if I have this correct, they ushered the media out a little bit early. They didn't even get to see individual drills today. And I'm not sure how that works. Like if the media is owed certain things, or if the Packers are free to decide, yeah, we're not showing you anything today. So no one was able to watch Jordan Love throw. No reporters, no TV, nobody was able to see it today. So if he can grip a football and throw it, well, we wouldn't know. We have no information. This is Matt LaFleur at the podium. He was asked, and I was very excited to get to Matt LaFleur's presser this afternoon to see what was asked and what was answered. Here is Matt LaFleur being asked about the status of Jordan Love and what he did at practice, because again, they weren't able to see him throw. He stretched and it looked like everything was okay, but then the media was ushered out. So this is the beginning of Matt LaFleur's presser today.
Was Jordan able to throw it all, Matt?
Yeah, he was limited. Yeah, on a limited basis.
That was it. That was all. That was it. That's the only questions and the only answers that I heard. Which I would have bet my life savings that that's exactly what he was going to say. He was limited, because that's what he said in the Titans week earlier this year and the Colts week earlier this year when he missed time. Any opportunity Matt LaFleur has had to simply say he was limited, that's what he said, and he said nothing else. So that's what I expected Matt LaFleur to say. I guess I expected there to be a little follow-up. They probably wouldn't have gotten anything. I just expected there to be a little bit more back and forth between Matt LaFleur and the media today. That was it. And if you missed it the first time, listen extra close, just in case there's something that you missed. Here is the beginning of Matt LaFleur's presser again.
Was Jordan able to throw it all, Matt?
Yeah, he was limited. Yeah, on a limited basis.
So the question was Jordan able to practice today? Because they couldn't watch any of practice, even individual drills. Matt LaFleur said, yes, he was limited. And then they asked, well, was he able to throw? And Matt LaFleur said, yes, in a limited fashion. And he had that, grin, eating grin face. That S eating, he was smiling because he knows. He's like, you guys want information? I'm not going to tell you. It's like, God. Okay. I guess going into a playoff game, you don't want to give away more than you have to. That was it. Now, the beginning of Jordan Love's availability, and Mike Clemens said, God bless Mike Clemens. He sent this to me right before the show started because I wanted to be able to play this for you. I could read you tweets, but that's not the same. Here's the beginning of Jordan Love's availability. He talks for about 50 seconds, and you can hear, I will echo some of the questions because they're difficult to hear.
Pretty much by the next day, I was feeling back normal, a little bit less numbing.
Your grip on the ball felt fine today.
So he's then asked, does the grip on the ball feel fine today?
Yeah.
He said yes, in case you can't hear that.
Is that the funny bone?
Mm-hmm.
Was that the funny bone, he's asked?
Everybody's had that.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Love replies, mm-hmm.
No, definitely not.
I believe the follow-up was, there's nothing funny about it. No, not at all.
We'll see. Yeah, I'm hopeful.
And I believe he was then asked, can you play? Are you going to be able to play this upcoming weekend? And I think the response was, yes, I'm hopeful.
Hey, Jordan, I didn't hear the first part
But do you have feeling back in? Is it
Pete,
back
show
fully
up to the
or
media on time. Pete, show up to the availability. I think that's Pete Doherty saying, I missed the first answer. Do you have feeling back in your hand?
Yes.
Yes. Well, you can hear this, but can you guys hear this perfectly? Am I just wasting your time?
Just based on my hand, getting back to it.
So if the feeling's back, does it still hurt in any way? Or
So if the feeling is back, I feel like, you know who I feel like right now is, have you guys seen Christmas with the Cranks? One of my favorite Christmas movies. Maybe watch it during the holidays. When they're sitting on the tail of the ambulance and Tim Allen is passing along details and Dan Aykroyd's character's like echoing it out into the Blair's coming home for Christmas and she's bringing her boyfriend. Do you have a turkey? Smoked trout. Smoked trout.
was it affecting you?
Such a niche reference, but I do love that movie.
Practice today?
Yeah, it's more my elbow. More my elbow. Covering that.
Soreness.
Yes.
Soreness. Yes. Okay. Soreness. That's such a niche reference. I love that movie. I do love Tim Allen. By the way, I believe his new sitcom on ABC starts tonight. It's called Trading Play. It doesn't matter. Back to Jordan Love. So the hand apparently feels fine. He can grip it just fine, but there's some soreness in the elbow. It's fine. It's not important for throwing a football. What's an elbow anyways? It's just a crucial joint on the arm that throws the ball for $55 million a year. So that's the latest. That's what we know. We were told very little. We did get some details from Jordan Love about how I can grip the ball. My hand feels fine, but my elbow is sore. So it's not perfectly back to normal. And when asked if he could play in the game, he said, I'm hopeful. Like, oh, God, okay. So it could be better. Could also be worse, right? Maybe he didn't practice at all. That would certainly be worse. It can always be worse. I think Packers fans would be more worried about this injury, and we'd be committing more stress and more attention to this injury if Jordan Love had been lighting it on fire the last couple of weeks. You know what I mean? Like if Jordan Love was white hot and playing his best football of the year and making big time throws and looking comfortable and the offense is humming, then I think this week we'd be spending a lot more time on this injury. Well, how is this going to impact his play? And is he going to be able to be his usual Jordan Love self? And is he still going to be able to make all the throws that we've come to expect? But he's played poorly the last couple weeks. So I think our concern about Jordan Love, okay, yeah, he's banged up, but even if he wasn't banged up, it's not like he's been lighting the world on fire anyways. And that's not just Jordan Love. That's the whole offense, but he's the quarterback. He's the one that makes $55 million a year. He's the one who touches the ball on every single play. And I got asked about this on WIP. I did a hit in Philly last night, like I said. I appreciate Ben Kenny for helping me out there, recommending me. It was my big break on the East Coast. And as I told Bill earlier today, I think last night, my hit in Philadelphia, I think that's going to be the one that thrusts me into the financial limelight. And they asked me, Grant Bills, how much concern is there over this injury? I said, look, we're worried because we hope he's 100%, but the concern was already there because he hadn't been playing well. He didn't really play all that well against the Saints. Malik Willis made the best throw of the night. He didn't play all that well against the Vikings. And then he wasn't playing all that well against the Bears. And then he banged his elbow and he's hurt. So we would be more stressed. I think we'd be committing more energy and more concern to this injury if Jordan Love had been lighting it on fire. But we were already concerned, is my point. We were already worried, right? But maybe after, seeing the details or the lack of details from practice today and then listening to the presser from LaFleur and Jordan Love, maybe we should be concerned about both. Maybe we should be worried that, hey, he wasn't playing great and now his elbow might really be bothering him. It's kind of an important part of the body for a quarterback. So I think Packers fans have reason to be concerned. And I saw that when Jordan Love and the media was ushered out of the practice, it's like couldn't see him throw. And then Matt LaFleur was limited. And then Jordan Love talked about how I'm hopeful that I can play. I saw all of the Packers content creators sharing clips from their podcast earlier this week where it's like, don't think that Jordan Love's injury is minor. Don't like this could be a serious injury, right? As the week passes, and I know Jordan Love's banged up, and I know he's been playing great. As the week passes, this is something I've been thinking a little bit this morning. I was thinking about this on my drive in. I'm actually getting more excited for this game the closer that it gets. And I know a lot of Packers fans and even my fellow owners too, who've been saying things like, this team is one and done. This team's a first round exit waiting to happen. This team, there's no way they beat the Eagles. And look, they're not favored in Philly, right? But Packers fans, you know this, nothing is guaranteed in the playoffs. Even if you're a top seed, even if you have a first round bye, and even if you have home field advantage. Packers, they had home field advantage in 2011. They had home field advantage in 2019, 2020, 2021, and they had it again in 21, 22. And they were favored in all of those playoff games. They lost all of those playoff games. So Packers fans, I know that we're so like, oh, this team's a first-round exit waiting to happen. There's no way they win this game. Well, can I remind you of all the times the Packers have been favored or of all the times where the home team in the playoffs has gotten beat? Very infrequently, or I would say almost never, are we in a situation where it's like, oh, this our team that's playing a playoff game, yeah, they're going to win this, no problem. Right? I've seen too much. I've watched this team in too many playoff games. I've watched the NFL for too long to think that there's such thing as a sure thing, even for teams that are favored or healthy or at home or a combination of all, right? The NFL playoffs are not for the faint of heart. Okay, folks? And I think that some Packers fans need a swift kick in the globes, okay? And I have some concerns about Matt LaFleur from last week, and I know Jordan Love hasn't been great, and now he's banged up. And the defense is improved, I think, but I don't really trust them situationally, and I'm not sure how I feel about Jeff Hafley situationally, the defensive coordinator, after watching what happened against Chicago on Sunday. So they're concerns, sure. But our Packers team has an opportunity to go get a massive win that could reframe how we're currently thinking about this season, how we're currently thinking about a nucleus of Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love. It could reframe our perspective on Jaden Reed in year 2, Romeo Doubs in year 3, Tucker Kraft in year 2, Josh Jacobs in this Packers offensive line. If they go into Philly this weekend and get an impressive win, it reframes so much of what we've thought and what we have believed to be true about this team up until this point. This is a huge opportunity. And Packers fans, it's two of the biggest brands in sports, Packers, Eagles, the primetime slot of the weekend, Sunday at 3:30, with America watching in the elements, outside. And there could be a little snow, there could be a little cold. That's theater. That's a television product. This isn't going to be some second-rate Texans Chargers in an ugly white dome on Saturday at 2:30. Like this game should be awesome. And even if you don't feel great about the Packers' chances to win, they could absolutely win this game. How many times have the Packers been favored at home against a team that we believe to be depleted or not as good or lesser in some way? Like, I understand that there's skepticism around this Packers team, but I also think we need to meet a little bit of that skepticism with a little bit of excitement. Like, I think this game's going to kick ass. This is going to be this has a chance to be the best, the finest, biggest feeling branded product of the weekend. I think it's going to be great. The jersey combinations going to be great. It's going to be outside in the elements. The crowd's going to be great. The game's going to finish under the lights at a venue that I think just pops off the screen. I'd prefer it's at Lambeau, but it's not in the Metrodome. It's not in one of these sterile indoor environments that all look the same. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass here, and I'm not trying to be a cheerleader, but I don't want this week to pass us by without any ounce of excitement about what could be an awesome playoff game. Evan Williams is back healthy. Quay Walker's probably going to be back healthy, right? So Evan Williams' presence, how does that put Javon Bullard in a better spot to succeed or Keyshawn Nixon in a better spot to succeed? Quay Walker coming back, how does that better uplift and position Edgerrin Cooper to make big plays? I understand that not a lot of us are going to pick the Packers, but guys, don't let this entire week pass us by without some level of excitement. This game is going to feel and look and sound awesome. And maybe the Packers lose. They probably will. That's what the odds makers are saying. But the more time passes this week and the closer we get to this weekend, the more excited I get to watch this game. Because man, it's football rules, playoff football, Packers, Eagles, two huge brands playing outside. It's not some second-rate Chargers, Texans Saturday afternoon in some ugly NRG dome with a bright white lid like that. I hate that. So I get the skepticism and the concern. We're going to talk about that. We're going to nitpick, but also this game should be awesome. It's going to feel big, and it's a huge opportunity. So I want to make sure that we got a little gusto. We got a little wind in our sails as well. If you have any thoughts on this, I'll take your calls next, 608-321-1670, and we're going to get to Tom Kelly, Sports Radio WIP in Philly, does the halftime broadcast on the Eagles broadcast because they're the flagship for the Eagles as well. So he's going to give us the eye on the enemy and some more perspective on this matchup coming up at 4:30. But next, your calls, I promise.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Was Jordan able to throw it all, Matt?
Yeah, he was limited.
You
Yeah, on a
smug.
limited basis.
He was waiting all day to do that. He was so excited. I can't wait for my press conference. They're going to ask if Jordan Love practiced, if he could throw. And when they do, I'm going to tell him he was limited. And then I'm not going to say anything else. God, these coaches. I understand. Yeah, can protect the competitive advantage. Yeah. Sure. Still, it bothers me. You guys, NFL head coaches, there's more to life than withholding information from reporters. These guys cherish it too much. Gets under my skin. Tom Kelly, Sports Radio WIP, does halftime on the Eagles broadcasts. He's going to join us for a classic Eye on the Enemy segment coming up in about 10 minutes. But first couple minutes, take your calls on anything that we've discussed so far. Jordan Love's injury and what we know about it, which is very limited. And I just think I'm trying to mix in some excitement as well. Not necessarily optimism. Look, if you don't think the Packers are going to win, fine. But let's not let this entire week pass us by without remembering Packers, Eagles, Sunday, 3:30, Fox, under the lights, the history, the previous matchups, all of the playoff successes and legendary players and coaches. God, it's great to be a Packer game. You're not relegating our ass to Saturday at 4 o'clock or Monday night like the Vikings and the Rams. So try to be excited a little bit. Don't let this pass you by without being a little bit of a fan. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Uncle Packer.
Uncle Packer, I know you're feeling a little, if nothing else, excitement. I know you're on board with me there.
Oh, I am so happy. Everything you say, I'm right on with.
Oh,
I was so excited about, I want to say that I hear that the natives in the mountains all over Pennsylvania are singing songs of your radio prowess. It's amazing. It's Pennsylvania today, New York, the West Coast, East Coast.
Yeah.
Won't be long, we'll start a sentence. I remember when I talked to him.
Yeah, it all started with an 8 p.m. 10-minute radio hit. That's where it all started. That's where to start, Uncle Packer.
Hey, I want to say something. I've been thinking this. What happens if we do win? And if we go in there and play a great game, I want to see all these people squeal back on I've been hearing people say, the Packer way. It's been the Packer way is killing us. like how we let veterans go. No, I understand if Desarius Smith has this amazing postseason, and I don't want that to happen. And it would look bad for the Packers. Or like last week, Desarius had a sack, so did Preston. And, with weird Uncle Aaron doing the stuff he did with our former great wide receiver, it's hard to see these players who were Packers not being Packers. And then we got this young team and we're stumbling and fumbling. But if we win this game, it's all good. It's all good.
I think a lot of this season and things that we've thought about this season, Uncle Packer, I just got to get a couple people in here. I appreciate the call. I think a lot of the things that we've talked about so far this year are now seen in a different light if they're able to notch this win. Now, all of a sudden, I think we look back and say, well, yeah, they didn't beat the Lions or the Vikings, but they were so close. Were those losses a little fluky? Right? Maybe Jordan Love, he was just dealing with injuries all year, and he's dealing with one now, which I put a little bit of that blame on him. Dude, stop taking hits. Get rid of the ball. Stop running around like a chicken with your head cut off. But you're right, Uncle Packer. If they win this weekend, it's a huge if, and I'm not even telling you that they will. I'd pick against them if I had to bet my house on it. But if they do win this weekend, a lot of the conversations, a lot of the things that we've said about this year are seen in a different light. And that's the beauty and the danger of a small sample size sport like the NFL. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
$500 and you're not going to Philly? A few less lawn parties and slow cookers, you would have afforded that.
Yeah, it was
God.
Well, here's the other thing, Dave from Monona. Okay, a couple $100 for a flight. The problem is I wouldn't be able to get back if I went to Sunday's game and I was invited. I wouldn't be able to be back for Bill's show, and it's hard to get a flight at a perfect time. So what if I'm not on the air the next day? If the Packers win.
Look at that. Deflections. That's what you got teammates for, but that's not what I call you.
Okay.
Deflections. Okay, the Green Bay will win if, one, they put a shot collar on Matt LaFleur up on the press box. If he even looks at the clock, looks at his flag, under a minute, they put the shot collar on him, so he's not allowed to do anything stupid.
Okay.
Number two, if the one common denominator of every loss under Matt LaFleur is special teams. If this team doesn't jump off sides, it makes a field goal. If Matt LaFleur doesn't do something stupid on 4th and 3, they keep the chains moving, this team can win. Look at all the losses. They lost because special teams, stupid mistakes. So, yeah, Green Bay can win. I just want to see somebody put a shot collar on him and not allow him to make any decisions under a minute, because after last Sunday, 58 seconds, Matt, you call a timeout, you idiot. You could have ran that down to 30. Shot collar.
Well,
and I got hopes they're going to win.
I do too, and I'm excited, Dave. We'll have to talk more. I'm just up against it. I want to get one more caller in because there were 3 waiting at the start of the segment. We have time to get to all of them, but I don't want to be late getting to Tommy Kelly. That decision to call the timeout, even if Matt LaFleur, even if they thought that they were going for it, which they shouldn't have been. They should have been on the same page. They should have known from the beginning, where's his range? Where do we got to get to? They didn't know that. That's a huge mistake. But even if they thought they were going to go for it, there's still no reason to take the timeout, because even if they didn't believe that Brandon McManus was in field goal range yet, we only need to get like 8 more yards. It's not like you need to go get a touchdown. So what are you saving the clock for? You don't need to save the clock. You let it run down, then take the timeout if you want, right? And then you have 30, whatever it would have been, 35 some seconds left, and you can go for it then if you'd like. And if you pick it up, you get a couple more yards, you run one more play, or you clock it. You still have plenty of clock to work with. So none of that explanation from Matt LaFleur either made sense or was acceptable. It was bad all around, to your point, Dave. And we got to avoid that in Philly. 608-321-1670. One more, and then we'll get to break. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
It's Wisco Chad.
Hey, Chad. How's
So
Sun Prairie?
confused. Oh, it was great. Lovely.
Good. All right, what were you
Nice
gonna
and
say?
cold.
Yeah, good.
So I'm still confused as to who Dave really likes. I know the answer is probably nobody, but yes. Dave, congratulations on cutting down yet another sports coach that is probably better than you will ever dream of being. Anyhow, I wonder, my big thing here is, the Jordan Love limited in practice. Who likes it more? Is it Bill Belichick or Matt LaFleur? Because he's really kind of turning into that like media villain where he just loves it.
Yeah.
He thinks it's the best thing ever when he gets to be up there and be like, oh, he was limited.
They love it. It gets them going. And I don't know. It's like it's part of the job. It's like, well, now I'm an NFL head coach. Now I can withhold information that's really not all that important. But they love it.
they don't all do that. I feel like Dan Campbell is just kind of like, yeah, he's effed up. He ain't gonna play.
Yeah, I don't feel great about it. Shanahan's pretty open too. Shanahan's pretty open with the media too.
Yeah, it's because he wants to be the exact opposite of his dad. His dad was shysty like that back in the day.
I suppose
I'd never forget Super Bowl 32 when he's, oh yeah, Davis is fine. No, he wasn't. He was having a horrible migraine.
Yeah, well, we all want to be better than our fathers before us.
Yes, so much so. Are you better at the radio than your father?
Yeah, but my dad was good at real jobs that help society. I mean, not so. I just do this. Thank you, Chad. I got to take a break. Yeah, Dave. To Dave's credit, he was calling Matt LaFleur Matt LaFlunk long before it was popular. He was years ahead of the curve on that one. So Dave gets a pass. He's grandfathered in for Matt LaFleur nicknames. He's been way ahead of the curve on that. Tom Kelly, Sports Radio WIP, does the halftime show on the Eagles broadcast. He's going to join us. Eye on the Enemy, just a classic sports radio segment. We'll do it next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
We're going to play a very physical team against the Packers. I can't tell you enough how much I think how well coached they are and how good their players are. They got a lot of respect for this team. You know, you can tell on the film how much they talk about fundamentals. You can tell on the film how much effort they give, and that's a direct reflection of their coaching staff and their players.
That's Eagles coach Nick Sirianni earlier today. We were paying attention to his presser because we wanted the latest on Jalen Hurts. And also, he said a couple things about the matchup. So a couple more comments. I can play them for you in the next hour of the show. You always want to talk up the opponent. Classic strategy. I don't know that I agree about the detailed stuff. I think the Packers are actually a little sloppy. Effort, look, I think they play hard. Some of the fundamentals and some of the little details, that's what's gotten them beat, I think, in their biggest games. And certainly their game against the Bears on Sunday. Joining us now, a little home and home. I was on with him last night in Philly. Sports Radio WIP. Tom Kelly is here. Is the halftime show during the Eagles broadcast as well. So let's get the latest on Jalen Hurts first, because both of these quarterbacks are dinged up in different ways. I expect he's going to play any practice today. Is there any designation still left with the concussion or any details that we should know, Tom?
Yeah, Grant, he was back at practice today, and that was really what everybody's looking for. And with the concussion protocol, it's complicated. Like, you never really know exactly what's going on, how far along guy is. But the fact that Jalen was out of practice today, was practicing with a helmet, which is notable. It seems like he's going to be good to go, and that's the expectation. I mean, he suffered this concussion against Washington at this point 2.5 weeks ago. This is kind of Nick Sirianni's MO, where when it comes to injuries, he'll play it out as long as he can. He thinks it gives him competitive advantage. I mean, I don't know how much it really does. But I don't think at this point, considering Jalen was out there today, there's not a lot of concern. I think everybody expects him to be out there good to go on Sunday.
It's something about these guys get NFL head coaching jobs, and they're just like, all right, now I can withhold as much information as possible. Like, they love it. Matt LaFleur's the same way. He's got a smirk on his face today as he refuses to give any additional information about the quarterback. I get it. It's competitive advantage, but I didn't realize the Eagles had won 10 in a row after their bye going into that game against Washington. That's the game where Jalen Hurts got hurt. But, I mean, then Tanner McKee and Kenny Pickett, they still almost beat Washington. That ended 36-33. So I know the Eagles season got off to a little bit of a rocky start, and there were some games they lost they probably shouldn't have. What changed? What clicked into gear? I'm sure it's a great many things, but what kind of came together for this Eagles team, and they really turned it on and just did nothing but win?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of stuff. And, of course, in Philadelphia, it's not like we ever overreact or anything.
Yeah.
But, they're 2-2 going into the bye week. And, hey, they looked really bad. The defense especially, and that's really been the biggest thing. The defense in week 4, they get lit up in Tampa Bay by Baker Mayfield. They can't tackle anybody. They can't cover. They're getting carved up. And after the bye week, they've been the best defense in football. And, I mean, Zach Bond has been a huge part of that. Yeah. Wisconsin guy, so there you go. But he's been incredible on a value signing for the Eagles. Jalen Carter's a monster up front. Quinyon Mitchell, I mean, he probably won't get the Defensive Rookie of the Year because he doesn't have the interception numbers or anything like that, but he's been locked down on the back end. So that's probably the biggest thing is the defense has gotten a lot better, and offensively, they've committed to the run game. I mean, they've really committed to, we're going to run the ball with Saquon Barkley. We're going to throw off of it. And they haven't thrown the ball all that effectively this year, but they haven't really had to. And I think that's really the question is, if they get into a game where they need to throw the ball, are they going to be able to do it and score enough points? But hey, to this point, they've been so dominant, they really haven't found themselves in that position.
You needed to replace both coordinators. So Kellen Moore, who's actually getting head coaching looks now, Vic Fangio came out and said, I don't want to do that. I'm fine just being a defensive coordinator. And I'm sure with two new coordinators, right, there's a little bit of it's the first month of a very long season, but we overreact to your point. What did both of those guys add that maybe the Eagles were lacking last year? Because it seems like both have really made a difference on the respective sides of the ball.
Well, yeah, it's a huge deal. And last year, I think what went wrong for the Eagles at the end of the season, and I mean, you think back, they were 10-1, and things fell apart at the end of the year. The coordinators were a big issue, and Sean Desai was the defensive coordinator. He was in that role for the first time. Then they make a change late in the year, go to Matt Patricia. That was a total disaster. And just having a steady hand like Vic Fangio, who's come in, utilized these guys the right way, has kind of adjusted as the season's gone on, has been big. And Kellen Moore, I think he's done a better job than I guess a lot of people have. Like, it's not like people think he's done a bad job, but it's not like this is the most creative offense. But hey, he's done what's worked, and they've ran that offense through Saquon Barkley. They've been able to get A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith the football when they had to. And if I'm one of these teams looking for a head coach right now, Kellen Moore would be near the top of my list. And you just look at his history. I mean, whether it's Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, quarterbacks seem to thrive where he goes. And I don't think Jalen's a whole lot different. It's just this year, the passing numbers aren't, I guess, stunning just because he hasn't had to throw the ball that much.
I think on daily talk radio, you get into conversations like that are so in the weeds, and you talk about sometimes the smallest, maybe meaningless stories, but that's why sports talk radio is awesome. So what kind of conversations throughout this year have you had about Nick Sirianni? Kind of tell me the story of his season, and like, what does he provide as a head coach? We go into this playoff game. What do Packers fans need to know? What's his deal, and what does he bring to the team?
Well, it's a great question, because it's the question that still people ask here in Philadelphia. And
Sure.
I don't really get it at this point. Like, the way I look at it, the record speaks for itself.
Yes.
And he's got one of the best winning percentages through 4 years of any coach in NFL history. I mean, that doesn't mean he's one of the best coaches in NFL history, but I mean, there are still people in Philadelphia who think like he's a buffoon and think he's a bad coach, which I just think is absolutely crazy. And I think it's always challenging when you have a coach in this like CEO position where he's not calling the plays, he's not running the offense. So the question is, like, what does he do? It's not a situation like Matt LaFleur in Green Bay where he is running the offense, he is calling the plays. But I think what Nick has done so well, especially this year, because last year he had a bigger hand in the offense, things didn't go well. It was kind of the plan this year. They're going to turn it over to Kellen Moore. Nick's going to step into this different role, and I think he's thrived in it, especially early in the year. Because when things were 2-2, I mean, there was a lot of noise around this team.
Oh yeah.
He was on the hot seat going into the season, and I think he's done a tremendous job of just keeping this thing together. And to win, 12 out of 13 to end the year, I just don't think that happens without the head coach having a major part. So I think Nick does a really good job. I think for as far as Packers fans with watch for, he's very aggressive on fourth downs. The Eagles are going to go for a lot of fourth downs if they're in that borderline of go for it or punt or go for it and kick the field goal. They're usually going to be aggressive and go for it in those situations.
There's a lot of big personalities on this Eagles team. Do you think that Nick Sirianni is a coach that manages those personalities very well and is a good leader for that group? Or do you think a lot of that comes from him? Like, he's noisy and that bleeds out to his team, like chicken or the egg with the drama? Because I think maybe drama is the wrong word, but vibes and energy, I think that's a big reason why this team has succeeded or failed over the last 2 years, right?
Yeah, and I think that is a part of it. And I think the players do feed off that energy from Nick. And that's another thing where, this whole season does really trace back to that bye week. And coming out of the bye week, Nick was a little different to start this year. I think the way things ended last year, his demeanor was a big topic of conversation. Like, there was a moment last year where he's like taunting Chiefs fans at the end of a game in Kansas City.
Yep.
And I think the organization wanted him to take a step back in that regard. And the first 4 games of the year, he was a little more subdued, didn't quite have that energy. And then coming out of the bye week, it was a totally different Nick Sirianni. And he said during that week off, the players went to him and said, hey, we need you to be yourself. We need you to give us that energy. We need you to show your personality. And I mean, you can look at it and say, is that just, something a coach can come out and say, or is it meaningful? But considering the results that have followed, I think it is meaningful. And I think it's one of those things where the personality of the team is obviously important, but I think Nick is good. It does mesh well with a lot of those big personalities in the locker room.
Tom Kelly is here. You can hear him on WIP in Philly, does the halftime broadcast, the Eagles games. You can check out his podcast, Trash Talk with TK, as well, wherever you get your podcast. On Sunday's game specifically, I told you and Ashland last night, you can tell early with the Packers if they're firing off blocks and they're avoiding penalties and they're catching the ball. That's kind of how you know it's game on. Like the Packers are here to play and they could beat just about anybody. But if they come in sloppy and they're not doing the little things, like I don't want to say that that's a death sentence because these games are long and all these teams at this point are good. They can all score points, but I think the first couple minutes are so important. And then you and Ashland said, well, it's kind of the opposite for the Eagles. They start slow, right? They're kind of the opposite. So tell me about that so we kind of understand what we're watching in the first quarter when this game starts on Sunday.
Yeah, man, I think this whole game's about the first quarter, honestly. I mean, the Eagles, the slow starts this year have been a major problem. Like, there was a long stretch where I think the first 6 or 7 games, they hadn't scored a point in the first quarter.
Yeah.
They only had 17 points total in the first quarter up until a few weeks ago. I think it was the Pittsburgh game, which was only like 4 weeks ago. Up to that point this season, they'd only scored 17 points in the first quarter total. So they are a notoriously slow starting team. That's changed a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but really, I mean, Jalen hasn't been out there a lot. Now, I think a lot of it is because Jalen's a slow starter. I think he struggles a little bit early in games. So I think it's really going to be about the start, and that's the fear in Philadelphia is, hey, they come out, they start slow. Packers jump on top 10, 14 points. That could be difficult to make up, but if the Eagles come out and the Eagles can get some points early, man, I think they could really run away with this.
Well, the Eagles are favored for a reason. I think they have fewer weaknesses. They have outstanding players. Both of their coordinators are really good. And I guess if I had to pick a team, I'd pick the Eagles, who knows how it plays out. But one thing that I'm trying to tell pessimistic Packers fans, it's like, look, this game's going to rule. It's the main game of the weekend. It's the primetime slot on Sunday. These are two teams with history. They've won championships. The brands are huge. It's going to be under the lights outside, which is so much better than some sterile indoor dome. So I'm excited. I think the Eagles will probably win, but like this is about as good as you can do in a wild card game, right? These are two huge brands. It's going to rule.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is a great matchup, and I agree with you. I think it is the best game of wild card weekend here. I'm really excited for it. And yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. Like, I don't think this is going to be a cakewalk for the Eagles. I mean, I think the fear in Philadelphia is we look at what the Packers, did to Dallas last year. Now, this Eagles team is definitely better than that Dallas team, so I don't see anything like that happening. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really intense game. These teams have had some good playoff battles here in Philadelphia in the past, so yeah, it should be a great matchup on Sunday for sure.
I'm looking forward to it. I don't feel great about my team's chances, but I'm going to get fired up to watch this game. Tom, we'll hear you on the broadcast on WIP this weekend. I appreciate the time, man. Thanks for this.
Thanks, Grant. Appreciate it, man.
Tom Kelly, Sports Radio, WIP, does the halftime broadcast. Follow him on Twitter at Tommy Kelly. Everyone go. The Bills bump. Hit him with a bunch of follows. He's like, oh, that's pretty cool. I went on. I got a little support from that audience. That's nice. That's nice. I'm glad I did that. Let's put that image. Let's put that idea in his mind. And his podcast, I think the way that he described it to me is anytime he hosts or he does a halftime report or anytime he does on-air content, it goes onto that podcast feed. Trash Talk with TK. If you really want to get in the weeds learning about this Eagles team, or shoot, you like Philly sports. All right, well, there you go. Trash Talk with TK. I appreciate Tom for his time. A little classic eye on the enemy segment, especially when the games are this big. You got to do an eye on the enemy. So we're appreciative of Tom. Let's take a break. I'll get to your texts because I've been neglecting those. At 5 o'clock, we'll get back to your phone calls. I'm not trying to be cheerleader, pom-pom, optimistic, sunshine, rainbows guy. I think the Eagles are going to win, but I don't want this week to pass us by. Like, we're fans of the 13-time world champion Green Bay Packers playing against the Eagles, who have won Super Bowls. They have Hall of Famers, legends. These are two huge brands. It's going to be the crown jewel of Wild Card Weekend. Like, even if you don't think the team can win, like, let's get a little excitement. Let's get a little life before, if the NFL season ends this weekend, I don't want it to go out with a whimper. Like, let's show some life and some excitement. We'll continue the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, hour number 2 incoming. Jesse Temple going to be here at 5:30. And gosh darn it, I recorded with Jesse at 2 o'clock this afternoon because that's what works for his schedule, covering events and existing as a regular human with a family and obligations. 2 o'clock is just when we do it. The biggest piece of news of the day, probably right up there with Jordan Love's elbow, honestly, is that Ricardo Hallman announced he's going to come back for a 5th year and play corner for the Badgers again. Huge, huge, huge story. And I don't know what Jesse would have said other than that's huge. But again, I haven't had a chance to go check his story, and I will just to make sure there's nothing about that I'm missing. But Jesse, we talked Badgers basketball, and we talked a little bit about the football program, the transfer portal, how they're handling it. And I picked his brain a little bit on Oregon, Ohio State, because a lot of times I'll ask Jesse, USC, Penn State, or a big game going on, and he'll be like, well, my job is to cover the Badgers because he's a dedicated reporter. But last week I asked him, what playoff game are you most excited for? He said, Oregon, Ohio State, 10 out of 10, and we talked about it. So I had to follow up and be like, yeah, we didn't see that coming. Yeah. Bobby and Menominee, just to get caught up on text, corrects me. The new Tim Allen sitcom, which I believe debuts on ABC tonight, after the debut of Abbott Elementary, I believe. Always Sunny crossover for fans of network TV. It's called Shifting Gears, not Trading Places. My bad. He says it still all comes down to getting the pass rush home and finishing. I think it's the same strategy defensively. Stop the run on 1st and 2nd down best you can, get them into obvious passing situations on 3rd down, and try to get off the field. And just hope that you can do a better job than you've done the last couple times, because I think that is their strategy. Hey, Grant, what is one thing you want to see the Packers do this game and one thing you want to see them not do? Target Kraft in the red zone, and I don't want to see any more jet sweeps. Matt LaFleur is still the only person who expects to gain positive yardage from that play. I don't mind the jet sweeps, but they got to be called at the right time. I think the jet sweep is a great counter for when the defense starts creeping up to pinch running lanes. Then you hit him outside. I think there's a time and place for that stuff, guys, especially because Jaden Reed and some of these guys are so dynamic with the ball in their hand. It's just about when it's called and how it's called. I think that's more of a factor. I think it should obviously absolutely be on the table It just has to be called in the correct spot. Let's take a call here. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, just love Eye on the Enemy.
Classic.
It really doesn't get much better than that. And that guest was really knowledgeable. I liked him.
I did too.
Got me feeling a little better though about this Packers-Eagles game. I'm getting more confident as the week rolls on.
I just think they got a shot. And in a playoff game, that's as much as you can ask for. I still think this team is talented, and I don't think they've played their best possible game. So I'm going to be hopeful. I wouldn't pick them, but I'm going to turn on the game with some excitement on Sunday. That's my goal, at least.
Yeah, I just wish it was Buck and Aikman back in the primetime Fox spot. But what are you going to do? Tom Brady will work.
Tom Brady is better than most people think. So I agree there.
Yeah, he's all right. I got a problem with the movie Christmas with the Cranks. Do you have time for this?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite movies, Christmas movies. But yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I just watched this over the holidays. But okay, so Blair, the daughter, goes away to Peru during Thanksgiving, and she makes this big deal about coming home for Christmas, and the parents cancel their vacation plans. Like, that was 4 weeks. You could go 4 weeks without seeing your daughter. I'm sorry.
It is kind of presumptive. And like, she goes to Peru and she's engaged. And as Tim Allen points out, I've been planning this vacation for 6 weeks. That's longer than they've been engaged, right? Like, it is a little presumptive by the daughter. And like, man, you go to Peru and you can't, maybe you're not cut out to be in the Peace Corps if you can't stay away from home more than 4 weeks.
Yeah, 100% agree. So big flaw with the movie, but other than that, just a classic. Best scene in that movie is when Tim Allen gets Botox and he's trying to eat the peaches. That's just favorite scene in the movie.
The water's falling out of his mouth as he tries to drink. Oh, it's great. And then they run into Father Zabriskie outside the tanning slide. It's a movie that I can watch every Christmas and it'll always like make me happy. It's not Gone with the Wind, but like, It's a Wonderful Life, great movie, but it's like 4 hours long. Like, I can't, sometimes I want something easier.
Yeah. And I was actually looking at a list of top 10 worst Christmas movies, and Christmas with the Cranks was number 2.
Yeah. It's always on those lists.
I just could not disagree with more. Have people seen Deck the Halls with Danny DeVito? I mean, that movie is much worse.
Yeah, it's Tim Allen. If Tim Allen's there, it can't be bad. It's like a LeBron team. It's like, even if the supporting cast isn't great, you know that guy's going to show up.
And Christmas with the Cranks has a great supporting cast. That's like probably the 2013 Miami Heat of movies.
What's his name? James Walter Becker, the old guy at the end. What a touching scene when he gives him the vacation too. Like, oh my God. It is. And now I want to watch it.
It just has a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought this up. Thank you, Cone. I got to go.
Yeah, have a good one, Grant.
Yeah, Jake Busey's in it. Cheech, the Cheech and Chong guy. I can't remember his last name. He's in it. Dan Aykroyd, Jamie Lee Curtis. A star-studded cast, really. And based on a movie that, of course, my mom has read. She read the book long before the movie, or based on a book, Skipping Christmas. And she says that line, the stupid idea of skipping Christmas. And that's like the peak of the scene. I won't accept slander for that movie, but it's always on the list of, like, Cone's right. You look up worst Christmas movies, it's always on there, and the ratings suck, but like, okay, it's not some cinematic masterpiece. It's a funny, heartwarming Christmas movie. Calm down. 2013 Heat. Dan Aykroyd's like Shane Battier. Hour number 2, Wisco Sports Show next.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, Packers quarterback Jordan Love was limited at practice today as he comes off an elbow injury. Love said he's hopeful he'll be able to play when Green Bay faces Philadelphia on Sunday in the wild card round. Love was injured in the second quarter of the loss to Chicago. Said he's still dealing with some soreness in his elbow when throwing, which is why he was limited today. Love also getting ready to deal with the number 1 pass defense in the NFL, and doing so without Christian Watson, who tore his ACL against Chicago.
You hurt for Christian, especially at this time of the year. But, like you said, definitely, other guys are going to have to step up. We got a deep receiver room. Guys have kind of done that all year. We've battled through different injuries, guys missing games, things like that. So just another situation that guys will step up and make plays, and we're confident in that group.
Meanwhile, Packers did get some guys back on the field for practice. Quay Walker, Evan Williams, and Romeo Doubs, all limited participants for the Eagles. Quarterback Jalen Hurts was back in the practice field for the first time since suffering a concussion and missing the final 2 games of the season. Kick on Sunday is at 3:30. Turning to Wisconsin, they're getting back one of their top defensive players for next year, Jesse Temple of The Athletic, reporting that Ricardo Hallman can return for his 5th and final season with the Badgers.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Farmers deal with a lot, including long days, stress, and fatigue. This is your reminder to take breaks, stretch, have a snack, and hydrate your body. Avoid farm accidents by keeping yourself healthy. Visit ruralmutual.com to learn how Rural Mutual supports Wisconsin farmers and prioritize safety on the farm.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Bucs return to action tonight against the Spurs in Milwaukee. Tip is at 8:30. And Wisconsin guard Max Klesmit listed day-to-day with an ankle injury. Badgers host Minnesota on Friday. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil. Print.
It's a disappointing finish, disappointing loss. It's the same thing. There's a lot of areas that we can clean up and we got to be better at. And the same kind of messages going through that locker room is, we got to go out there and make these plays and execute. We just have to be better.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
M. Emmett Walsh was the name I was looking for. What did I say? Like M. Walter Becker? That's the Steely Dan guy. Why was that the name that came to my mind? Packers injury report is out. Limited is... Let's see, Javon Bullard, Edgerrin Cooper, Brenton Cox, Andre Dillard. Full is Romeo Doubs. It's good to know. Jordan Love limited. TJ Slayton, DNP. That's football guy talk for did not participate. Quay Walker limited. Christian Watson, DNP. Evan Williams, Malik Willis limited as well. We didn't get a whole lot from Matt LaFleur. Jordan Love shared a little bit more for those of you that missed the very beginning of the show. First of all, how dare you? You be here at 4 and you sit through the whole 2 hours. If you missed the very beginning of the show, I'll play Jordan Love's comments here for you in a sec. It's pretty brief, but he gave a little bit more information than Matt LaFleur did, which isn't a shocker. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills as we reset for hour number 2 on Twitter at Wisco Grant. The live stream up and running. We're pulling a nice number today, too. Lots of eyes. Tom Kelly, who joined us from Sports Radio WIP. Good eye on the enemy. Maybe he had something to do with that. YouTube and Facebook. Just look up the Wisco Sports Show. And for those of you that listen on the radio every day, I appreciate you. If you could subscribe to the podcast of the show, that helps me. Those numbers are good. That makes me a little bit more valuable. And it costs you absolutely nothing. And it takes like all of 2 seconds. So if you use Spotify, or Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, or whatever, just go hit the subscribe button. It just helps my numbers a little bit. I would appreciate the support. And I know that some of you just listen day after every day on the podcast. Some of you don't even listen on the radio, and you might be listening to this tomorrow or Thursday in your case. Appreciate you as well. Thank you for supporting. Here's Jordan Love, and then we'll get back to, I got a caller that might want to talk about Christmas with the Cranks, so I want to make sure I give them a chance to get in there, because that was a good call from Cone. Here's the beginning of Jordan Love's availability today, and I'll kind of echo the questions and the answers if you can't hear.
Pretty much by the next day, I was feeling back normal, a little bit less numbing.
So your grip on the ball felt fine today?
Yeah.
Is it the funny bone?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Funny bone?
Mm-hmm. No.
That
definitely not.
God, nothing funny about that. Who said that? It's funny, but God.
We'll see. Yeah. I'm hopeful.
Jordan, I didn't hear the first part, but do you have feeling back in? Is it back fully or close?
Yes.
Feelings back.
Jordan, why'd they limit you? Just based on my hand, getting back to it.
Why'd they limit you?
So if the feeling's back, does it still hurt in any way, or how is it affecting you at practice today?
Yeah, it's more my elbow. Covering that.
Soreness.
Yes.
Elbow is sore. Elbow is sore. So the hand seems to be fine. He's got feeling back now. It's just a sore elbow, which is no small thing either. That is a very important joint in throwing the football. You got the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist. I'm no doctor, but all three of them seem pretty important for throwing a football, especially outside late in the year in an NFL game. All right. A phone call, 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Mike in Eau Claire.
Mike in Eau Claire. What's going on, Mike? Let's get serious.
I don't like the downness You know me, I'm always confident. Right? They need to watch Rocky IV and play that song by Robert Tepper, Tepper. I know you like music. Look that up. No, that's the classical music. It's the ain't no easy way out, ain't no shortcut home.
Oh no! Wait, that's not. So, it is Rocky.
Rocky IV.
Gotcha,
Rocky
gotcha.
IV. When he's fighting the Russian, this is what we're up against. If we beat Philly, we face Detroit. So this is what we're up against. We got to do that. And if we win that, then we still got to beat Minnesota, Tampa, Washington, or LA Rams to get to the Super Bowl.
It's not supposed to
That's
be
where the
easy.
Packers are at.
There's no easy matchups. I mean, I was
There's-
talking last night. I did a hit with a show in Philly, and I'm like, yeah, look, the Packers haven't been perfect, but still, if I was a fan of a team that got the 2 seed, I would hope for a slightly lesser team than this Packers team. This Packers team went in and beat the brakes off of Dallas in round 1 last year. They got a lot of talent. So it's not like there's some crummy Saints team that got in at, 8-9 or 9-8. This is a legit team for a 7 seed.
I think Watson going out is good. Concentrate on a couple receivers. Just spread it around. Yeah, it can be good, but all the most successful teams have their 1, 2, 3 set up.
Sure.
We got 2 tight ends. That's great. Let's just focus the game plan on Josh Jacobs running I don't want to say swear words, but Josh Jacobs running it up there. And then have some game plan for some specific receivers instead of, we'll just highlight Dontavian Wicks for a couple plays and highlight that. I haven't liked it. I was happy about it to start the season.
Sure.
But it hasn't turned into anything. It's like, no, you just got a bunch of mush now. We got 7 good receivers and they're just mush.
Yeah, they're all good, but none of them have been great, I think, when they've needed to be great.
No,
Mike?
Exactly.
Sure.
Our running backs, I'm more excited about it. I like Josh Jacobs, Wilson, and Brooks. That's more solid than our receiving game so far this year. I don't know. Well, we'll see what happens. But like I said, we got Mount Rushmore to climb. Let's do it.
Yeah, we do. I will check out that Rocky music. I appreciate it, Mike in Eau Claire. Doesn't like to be down. He began his call Mike in Eau Claire. You sound like Eeyore, Mike. Fire it up a little bit. Maybe it's been a long day for Mike, I'm sure. The absence of Christian Watson is interesting. You said it. You think it's a good thing. Now, I'm not going to agree with you there because he's really fast, really tall, and he's good. He's a good player, really good player. And he adds something to that receiving core that really no one else in that group can. Now, you want them to take a little bit more focused approach at wide receiver. Stop focusing on, we got 6 or 7 guys. I think your point, Mike, is, let's dial in on who we believe to be maybe the best 2 or 3. And I think that's ultimately going to be Romeo Doubs. Doubs was the guy who showed up against Dallas last year and kicked ass. And they're probably going to have to go against some physical, sticky man coverage. I think Vic Fangio with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are going to force these wide receivers, especially without Watson, to win, to beat them. They're not going to go into some soft zone. I don't think they're going to say, we're going to line up and we think we're better than you. So prove that you can win, prove that you can beat us. And the burden of proof is going to be on Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks. I think the tip of the spear should be Doubs in this game. Now, he's missed a little time here with an illness and he had a concussion. I think Romeo Doubs is a little bit better than everyone is currently thinking because it's been a quiet season for him at times. I trust him in big moments, at least more than I trust Wicks, who's actually come along nicely, and Reed, who's had a real sophomore slump now down the stretch with some mistakes and some drops and some fumbles and just he's not getting the job done. I don't think that the Packers need a wide receiver 1. A lot of that discussion has been reopened because before the year, it's like, we don't need a wide receiver 1. We got a bunch of guys we like. I still think this wide receiving core is constructed really well. They're not missing anyone. What they're missing is one of the guys on this team stepping up when necessary. And 1 week it might be Jaden Reed. 1 week it might be Dontavian Wicks. 1 week it might be Romeo Doubs. They're probably going to have more opportunities now without Watson, obviously. That's just a a fact. That's the way numbers work. There's going to be more targets to go around. Their issue is not they need a wide receiver one. Let's go pay T. Higgins. Let's go trade for Tyreek Hill or whatever. These individuals need to take the step that I know they're all capable of taking, right? When Romeo Doubs gets opportunities, it's time to go for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. You know what I mean? Or if Dontavian Wicks, if he's got the favorable matchup, dude, you got to go win. And you got to be the wide receiver one on that day in that game, right? I still believe in the way that this team has been built. The individuals in that wide receiving core need to perform better and need to step up. And luckily, although they haven't really so far this season, I still think they're very capable and they have an opportunity, a great opportunity on Sunday to do it. So I that's my excitement. I want to see what Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, and Jaden Reed bring to the table because I don't think they're happy with how this season has gone. I don't think they're satisfied. They still haven't got a big win yet. I think this team's going to be hungry, and I think that wide receiving group, especially after the fumble from Reed last week and now Watson, I think that group's going to be fired up. I'm excited to watch him. I think the ability is still there. They just haven't risen to the occasion yet. Sunday's a good opportunity. It might be the last opportunity, so I hope they grab it. I think they will. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Was that Mike and LeClaire that was all fired up?
He was pretty fired up. Couldn't you tell?
We love fired up takes. A lot of burning takes today. A lot of energy going around. I like the caller in the first hour, and I missed the middle chunk of the show. But they said, we've been kind of negative. There's been kind of a lot of negativity, and I've been leading the charge on some of that around this Packers team. But if they get a win, and I like your take too, of like all of our takes are going to recede faster than a hairline.
Yeah.
Like if we come back on Monday and it's a victory Packers Monday, I think the entire way that we change or that we view this season overall flips entirely on its head. And I think there's a lot to that, and there's a lot to be excited about, and that's what's so exciting about the fresh start of the playoffs. And
that's also what kind of makes the sport ridiculous. It's such a small sample size. Like our takes shouldn't be able to flip on one game, but that's how it works, and that's kind of the fun, right?
But that's what it comes down to, right? Legacies are measured in Super Bowls, not in MVP. Yeah. Keep that in mind. In terms of the game itself, still very excited. Can't wait. A lot of emphasis today on receivers. I just think if the Packers win this game, for the love of God, Josh Jacobs, can he have 30 touches? That's kind of what I've been thinking about and reading a lot online. A lot of receiver talk. Who's going to step up? I do like the Tucker Kraft angle. I think he's going to play a big role. But if we can get a guy like Josh Jacobs, because Saquon Barkley's going to get a ton of touches. I think Matt LaFleur, man, come on, sack up. This is the game where you got to take your superstars. There is no tomorrow. You're not saving Aaron Jones for another run. Don't give him 4 carries and a half. Give him 12. And you're a creative head coach. You're the offensive mastermind. Figure out how to get him 12 meaningful touches. So that's my angle on the game.
Well, no, I think you're right. Look, I think it goes without saying that Josh Jacobs has to be the driving force. Like, I think we all just assume that. There's going to be opportunities in the red zone and maybe on a 3rd and 5 where one of these wide receivers, you have to go get open and you have to bring the ball in. And I think those are the contexts, with this wide receiving core that I'm talking about. And that's the group that's left a little bit to be desired. I don't think there's a conversation that we need to have today where it's like Josh Jacobs needs to do this, this, and this. I kind of just assume that he's going to do his part on Sunday.
Packer fans are making that assumption because we have a lot of really smart folks, and you are going to make that assumption. My trauma is from the 49ers playoff game.
Sure.
It's from other historical meltdowns, even if it's not the playoffs, in big moments where it's 7 minutes left in the third quarter, and Aaron Jones got 3 touches, and we are going 3 and out with a bunch of passes. Exactly.
Well, that's a coaching. That's a coaching thing. Then that's a good coaching point. I guess I should read it that way. That's a commentary on coaching, not necessarily on Josh Jacobs. I think I hear you better now.
Well, yeah, he's a running back. He doesn't get to choose when he gets the ball. Quarterbacks, they could change the play. Running backs, they got limited impact. Anybody who's played Madden career knows that. Real quick on the Badgers, big pickup for Ricardo Hallman, UW-NIL fighting back. I've been very vocal on this on Twitter, and I know it's not necessarily your cup of tea, but did a little bit of research today. And Wisconsin, when you're comparing Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Nebraska, is so freaking far behind when it comes to building an online community and getting their fans engaged in meaningful ways in the offseason. And I think that I'm just putting it out there, putting the word out there. I will continue to hammer this, even if not a single other listener cares, because I do think building community is where NIL needs to go. And Wisconsin is like 12th in the Big Ten. And if you're competing for championships, every part of your organization has to be doing so. And right now, our NIL is S tier. And I'm not talking about the top of the chart. I'm talking about the bottom.
Not the gaming
little soapbox.
Yeah, not the gaming S tier, but the euphemism for excrement tier. Vagabond John, that's a good call. And look, I see some of your tweets when I think he's on Twitter at the Red Shed. He's tweeted screenshots of like, this is what I don't know what the Iowa Collective is, but this is the Instagram page, and it's well done. And then you look at the Varsity Collective on Instagram, there's like 7 followers. You know what I mean? Like, it's not active. It's not a thing. So my energy and focus does not necessarily lie there, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, right? It show's only 2 hours. I can only cover so much. You mentioned Ricardo Hallman. I think it's the biggest story of the day, other than Jordan Love's elbow, which we didn't really get a ton of information on. Ricardo Hallman saying he's going to come back play for the Badgers next year is massive, because they were crushed on the back end of their defense this offseason, losing guys. Now, they still have a lot of work to do, but Ricardo Hallman was probably the best player on their defense last year, and having that pillar around which to build, huge. Really, really huge. Let's take another call or two, and then we'll get to a break. And Jesse Temple, by the way, going to join us to talk Badgers basketball and football at 5:30. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant. Clemhead Mike.
Clemhead, good evening.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm getting excited for this game on Sunday. I don't necessarily know that I'm confident that the Packers are going to win, but I think this game's going to be awesome.
I'm trying to convince my wife that this is a sports divorce weekend. Leave me alone.
Right.
But I was interested when you said that Christmas with the Cranks was adapted from a book.
John Grisham.
Oh, wow.
Skipping Christmas.
Speaking of movies adapted from a book, I remember a couple of years ago, somebody was giving you a super hard time about not watching The Godfather.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch it?
As David and Madison, I still haven't watched it. It's not good.
Oh, that's okay. I read the book back in the 70s, and about 10 years ago, I watched the movie. I was not impressed. The book was so much better. But anyway.
Well, really, that sounds like the better thing is I'll read the book and then tell people that you've never seen The Godfather. I'll be like, I've read the book. Don't waste my time. That'll allow me to be morally superior, you know?
Yes, morally superior, because I read the book, and you people never read the book.
Yeah, exactly.
All you did is watch the stupid movie. Yeah, I am worried that Matt LaFleur is becoming Bill Belichick, but a small part of me wants Jordan Love not to be able to play Sunday, and Malik Willis. I don't know. Jordan's been slumping, and what do you do when the batter slumping in baseball? You bring in the pinch hitter, and Malik Willis has played so well this year. I wouldn't, if he played, I wouldn't be upset.
So I know there's a lot of Packers fans that have a lot of Malik Willis belief. And I understand, like, he's looked good in just about every bit of action that he's got. It's been small sample sizes against lesser teams.
Right.
It would be interesting to see. This is what I told Tony in Texas the other day, too, because he has been banging the Malik Willis drum, even though he won't plant his flag. He's been sitting on the fence. But if this would happen last year, Jordan Love's first year, hasn't got a contract yet. He misses 3 or 4 games, and Malik Willis looks good in all of them. Then it's a little more interesting, right? But given the fact that they paid Jordan Love, and I just think it's a non-starter this year. Although I like watching him. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. And Malik can run. I mean, he can really run. So that adds an extra dimension.
I mean, not that we saw that on 4th and shorts last week. You know, why run Malik Willis?
Right.
Let's give it to Jaden Reed on an outside sweep, but he can run. Wasted time.
Yes. Oh my God. My Packer phone brick did some extra mileage last Sunday. So.
Your phone brick?
Yeah. I have a phone Packer brick. You throw it as a TV when you're mad, so you don't smash your.
I thought you said phone. So you have I gotcha. So you have a release. I gotcha.
So you don't smash your $2,800 77-inch OLED TV.
I'm
looking at you right now.
I gotta go to the Apple store. Clemhead, I appreciate it. I just gotta get to a break. I gotta go to the Apple store. I made an appointment with the Genius Bar because my phone charger. I came home. When I say I came home drunk, it's not like I was we were just out. We went out to get drinks. And I came home and my inhibitions were maybe I was a little clunky. I dropped my phone in the sink, which it's not like I dunked it, but it got a little wet. And then I went to bed and I plugged it in. And normally when you plug it in, it'll tell you there's moisture detected. But I was just ready to go to sleep. So I plugged it in. I didn't look twice at it and it hasn't been charging. So I've been using a wireless charger, which is fine. But I got to go to the Super Bowl and I don't want to have to carry around a wireless charger. I'm not doing that. So I got to go to the Genius Bar on Saturday. Made an appointment. Genius. They love being called geniuses. hipsters with beanies. Clement Mike, you did make a good point about resting a guy. If a guy's slumping, rest him. And we see that in baseball a lot. For example, in Craig Counsell's final year, Willie Adames was not playing well at all. So Craig Counsell responded by never giving him any time off. He got a little time off and immediately performed well. So Craig Counsell responded in turn by not giving him a single day off the rest of the year. So you're right. That is typically what you do. Craig Counsell didn't do it, and Willie Adames had a down season because of it. But what are you going to do? 3 minutes. We'll come back. If you're on hold, stay there. I'll get to you, I promise. Jesse Temple in about 10 or 15 minutes. More of the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
We're going to play a very physical team against the Packers. I can't tell you enough how much I think how well coached they are and how good their players are. They got a lot of respect for this team. You know, you can tell on the film how much they talk about fundamentals. You can tell on the film how much effort they give, and that's a direct reflection of their coaching staff and their players.
It's Nick Sirianni earlier today talking up the opponent. Classic football coaching strategy. And I think the Packers I think Matt LaFleur's a good coach. I think they're a good team. Play with physicality, I think, in some parts of the team they do. Others, maybe not so much. I think it's a little bit of BS. It's like, well, they're really good with the details, the fundamentals. Well, a lot of fumbles, a lot of drops, a lot of penalties. So, I don't know. Bad special teams performance last week. I'm hoping that was an outlier. Everyone last week wanted to act like, well, the special teams have been a train wreck all year. I think, for the most part, they've been fine. They had a bad week. hopefully it starts and ends there. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Yeah, besides taking bad timeouts and false starts and offsides, we are very disciplined.
Yeah, they get the little things, Tony, in Texas. They're very disciplined, and the details are good if you overlook like a bunch of things. That's why, look,
Other than that, we're good.
I think the Packers are a good team, and there's lots of things that they do well. But when I heard Sirianni talking about that, it's like, okay, well, now I think he's talking up the opponent because that's what coaches do. You understand, you're a coach. You're not going to tell your guys, this team's no good. You don't do that.
Yeah, no, you don't. Hey, and I'm an older guy. So I've seen a lot of Packer football. Well, I am. I'm middle-aged. And I've seen a lot of good Packer football throughout the years. And as I get older, I look at this and I go, okay, was I entertained this year? Yes. Do I like the players? Yeah, I like these guys.
I do too.
Was it fun? Yeah, hell yeah. I went to 3 games. It was a blast. They went 3-0. Had a great time at 2 road games, Nashville and LA, Green Bay. Had a hell of a fun time. The last category is, did they make a playoff run? And that's what we're going to see right now. And I hate to say it, I don't think they are. I think they're to lose.
I mean, they're underdogs for a reason. The Eagles are really good. They're a little bit more experienced. I think they have better players at certain positions. But I'm not going to discount the possibility. I mean, look, I'm not telling you anything you know. Sure. Never say never. Like anybody, of course, obviously. But I don't know. Part of me wants to hold out hope that we still haven't seen their best game yet, and they're going to come out pissed off and really wanting to stick it to Philly and get a good win here. So I don't know. I can see the shape of it.
Well, we have good players, and I know we've been talking about the Malik Willis thing and LaCroix Butler's busting my chops and such. Fine. But this team is better when they run the ball more, and when they run the ball 55, 60% of the time, they're a better team. Now, you guys were using baseball analogies and such, and here's the thing I got a concern with Jordan Love. It's almost like that relief pitcher that needs like an extra 5 minutes of warm-ups in the bullpen before he's good, instead of he needs to be able to come in there and just make a few throws here and there. I want them to run the ball 60% of the time, then Jordan, it's 3rd and 3, make the damn pass.
Yeah.
4th and 2, be able to make a little swing pass, and then we'll take a couple of shots downfield when we need to. But to me, I see Malik comes in. He's able to do that, Grant. He doesn't pass that much when he's in the game. 12, 15 times he passes, and they're darts usually right where they need to go. With Jordan, they're high, they're low, and that's the thing. Jordan needs like extra time to get in rhythm, and that's not the way to win. That's not the way this team's going to win. Their defense is not good enough. If the other team, the Eagles, have the ball and they have a chance to win the game, we will lose.
Yeah.
Bill Michaels was excellent today. I was like, damn, Bill, I wish you'd take my call because I could not agree more with you. If the Eagles have the ball with a chance to win or tie, it will happen, and we will lose again. I hate to be that guy.
Yeah, it seems like more often than not. I keep referencing the Rams game because the defense did get a stop when they needed earlier this year. The defense won them that game when the offense really didn't show up.
They did. Yeah, I was at that game.
Yeah,
yes.
that is what that is. But I'm not going to disagree and tell you that you're wrong because it feels like anytime the defense has a chance to slam the door, they've mostly been unable to do it, and that goes back years, not just this year. I also think, Tony, to your point, I got to run because there's a couple more on hold. I'll give you some more time later this week, Tony, if you call back. We talk about a quarterback needing to get in a rhythm. Wide receivers need to get in a rhythm too. And I think it's a lot easier for one of these guys to get in a rhythm if Jordan Love's hitting him in the hands, letting him run, letting him catch a ball with some confidence. And then if they get a couple catches in and we're in the 3rd quarter and they need to scoop a ball that's a little low, I think it's easier. So I think precision from Jordan Love early on really helps these wide receivers too. And I think he's got to help them out a little bit this weekend by doing that. 608-321-1670. 2 more calls and we're going to get to Jesse Temple. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello? All right, never mind. 1 more call. Let's go to line number 3. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Jim from Alaska. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Jim and I. I'm great, Jim. How are you?
Hey, good. The other day, I just wanted to get a little perspective on where the Packers are at right now, with this being Jordan's 2nd year as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back in the archives, and I'm old enough to remember this. I wanted to see where the Packers with Aaron Rodgers were in year 2 of him starting. That's the year that they actually did make the playoffs and lost to Arizona in the 1st round. But Love's stats are very comparable the first 2 years to Aaron Rodgers.
They're almost identical last year. I remember we talked about that a lot, but somehow this year we haven't talked about that much, Jim.
Absolutely. And the quarterback this year hasn't thrown an interception in a month, which I think is pretty impressive. And the thing that jumped out at me when I look back at the old record book, here's who Rodgers was throwing to in his second year. And then I compared them to who Love is throwing to this year. And while decent, it is not James Jones, Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, and Jordy Nelson.
Greg Jennings was a legit number one wide receiver with lots of experience at that point. Yeah.
I mean, all four of those guys were just horses. Our guys are okay, but putting it in perspective, I think our quarterback is doing just fine. And I think, next year is the year where I would expect Green Bay to really shine now that after this season, they get out from under that salary cap problem with Aaron Rodgers that they had and Bakhtiari, and they're able to really load up just a little bit more. So I think they're okay, and I'm optimistic that they may be able to put on a really good show out in Philly this week. What do you think?
So I agree with all that, Jim, and to your point about year number 2 being on schedule for where maybe they should be, and maybe we were a little too high on them. You know what would really get Packers fans to buy into that and accept that is if they won this weekend. If the Packers got a huge win in the playoffs, they won this weekend. I think Packers fans were all saying, you know what? Year number 2 wasn't perfect, but that feels like a really nice step. And it feels like Jordan Love and these young wide receivers are probably right on the pace that they should be on. I still have some questions about Matt LaFleur because he's been here a lot longer, but that's separate. If we're just talking about the young team, this is the second youngest team in the NFL ever make the playoffs after last year's team. Packers fans will wrap their arms around that and accept it a lot more if the Packers win this weekend. I think Packers fans will really accept that. If they lose this weekend, it's going to be tough to sell that to Packers fans, even though I think it's accurate. Let's take a 5-minute break. Jesse Temple will join us next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, got a couple segments left. The Bill Michaels Huddle coming up on a lot of these same stations. And of course, all of Bill's streaming platforms as well. That's coming up at 6. Mike Clemens will bring the latest busy day in Green Bay because we're trying to get some of these injury designations figured out before Packers-Eagles coming up this weekend. So you're not going to want to miss that. We're about to hear my conversation from earlier today with Jesse Temple. I normally record with him about 2 in the afternoon, right when Bill's show ends. However, the news of Ricardo Hallman's return broke after this, so we don't talk about that. And I don't know that there's much to say about it other than that's a really big deal. It's one of their best, maybe their best defensive player from last year, coming back and playing in a position group where the Badgers just got smoked in the portal. They lost so many guys from that secondary, and getting their best guy to return for a 5th year when he probably had NFL prospects or maybe, big money at another program to get him back is huge. So we don't talk about that, but we talk Badgers basketball and then, some of the happenings and coaching changes with the Badgers. They got the quarterback coach figured out and a couple of other things like that. So here's our conversation. Jesse Temple is here. You can read his work at The Athletic. We're lucky to have him every week on all of our shows across our network. You can hear him on The Camp with Zach and The Swing as well. And I do love getting some Badgers basketball content. I keep hearing from listeners and, everyone's making the joke, Jesse. It's like, this isn't your grandpa's, Badgers basketball team. This isn't my own child. This isn't my high school Badger basketball team. Like, to think that they would be scoring this much and shooting this well and putting up totals like this even 2 or 3 years ago would be crazy. Forget 20 years ago. It's been really fun to watch them, especially the Iowa game on Friday and then what they did in Piscataway on Monday.
Yeah, you're not going to see very often a team drop 116 points at Wisconsin and make 21 threes. That's why the 21 threes is a program record and the 116 points is the second most ever. But on the whole, it's been tremendously entertaining to watch. This is a team that is averaging more points than any Badgers team since 1970-71 and more assists than any Badgers team since 93-94. And obviously they lead the country in free throw shooting. And that right there is a recipe for being 12-3 right now.
So can we circle back? I believe this was your story and we might've talked about it at the time, but I remember Greg Gard talking about, and you had him on The Swing, you and Zach talked with him about how he's kind of reinvented this program to be more of an NBA program at college. And then he talked about leading with offense a little bit more and prioritizing offense. So you had those conversations with Greg Gard before the season. In what ways have you seen kind of those comments come to life so far this season?
It starts with the staff that he hired. Can't overstate the importance of bringing in someone like Kirk Penny last season. Kirk is a Hall of Famer in Europe.
and he implemented a different type of offense. It's a ball screen continuity offense. So even though we think of Wisconsin basketball as a swing, they haven't run that in quite a while. And it's really helped them open the floor, create more spacing. And I think Greg deserves a lot of credit for some flexibility, because it's easy as a head coach to be like, it's my way or the highway. I'm only going to do one thing. I know what works. He's empowered his assistant coaches, and he's taken their input, and it has made Wisconsin so much better. And certainly Penny isn't the only one. You can go down the line. He brought in former Badger and NBA player Greg Steemsma this offseason. And I think it's just an overall approach of his understanding the way college basketball has changed in the last decade, because he said the games, the days of winning games 50 to 48 are over. You know you're going to have to score in the 80s, and Wisconsin has been able to adapt quite well.
I think basketball has taught us a lesson that maybe, we can learn about the football side. Two different programs, lots more scholarships, right? Different sports entirely, apples and oranges. But, man, you hit on one or two transfers. It's amazing how that can kind of soothe other issues or shortcomings on your team. I mean, what Tanjay has given them, and then Amos and some other guys as well, I just got to think if Luke Fickell and this football team over this offseason could just find transfers that hit and are difference makers in a way that they really have been unable to find the last two off seasons, it would make such a big difference. And I think I'm watching basketball a little bit as much as you can and trying to think, okay, what can I take from that to apply to the football side? Have you been thinking along those lines? I know it's two different sports, but it's hard not to think like that.
To be honest, I don't really think that way, because it's an apples to oranges comparison, and for the reasons that are obvious. You have 5 guys on the floor at one time, and if one of them is a John Tanji who's giving you 18.4 points per game and making 93.5% of his free throws and doing everything else that he is, it completely changes the dynamic. You could have a great middle linebacker. I suppose the biggest thing would be having a quarterback who could just totally dominate. But there are 10 other guys on the field, and then there's the defense, and then there's special teams. It's just a totally different sport. But I hear where you're coming from.
Sure.
And certainly if Wisconsin's football program could hit more home runs through the portal, it would make a big difference. But that's what makes basketball so different. And that's why the portal, to me, is an even bigger deal on that side. And we should also say retention is such a big deal. It's something that Greg and his staff consistently talk about. Yeah, they brought in 3 portal guys. They needed those specific positions because they lost players to the portal. But look at everybody else who's playing. The other 4 starters have been here. And I think that matters too in this era, because you can bring in new guys and have the returning players help them understand what the culture is like and how things are done.
I talked with a college basketball guest from 24/7 who I have on from time to time, and he described Greg Gard's transfer approach a little moneyballish in the offseason. We're going to go get Tanjay from Colorado State or a player from Arkansas State, guys from smaller programs who maybe aren't heralded nationally and maybe won't cost a ton of money, but they have traits or they have skills that we think can scale in a larger program. And now let's shift completely to football. I look at some of the schools that they've plucked from. Jacksonville State, they got a corner from their defensive line from Grambling, and Kentucky, which is an SEC, but still UT Martin, Louisville, Ball State, this tight end. Have you noticed any themes or strategies in the transfer portal this offseason from Luke Fickell that's maybe a departure for what they've been doing the last couple of seasons?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a departure, because I remember Luke talking about this last offseason and how much he values players who are coming up from a different level.
Sure.
And maybe have that chip on their shoulder and want to prove themselves at the highest level. That's basically what Wisconsin did this portal offseason as well. And that's not to say they're not going to go after quality Power 4 players. Suggs from LSU, even though he came from a D2 school where Matt Mitchell was the head coach in Grand Valley State. They got an outside linebacker from Louisville, another one from Kentucky. But on the whole, you're right. Look at a lot of these guys they got. People like Matt Young, which is a different circumstance, but was playing at Division III Bethel and was the best player in his position in the country. And now he's a Neenah native, so that's different. But Charles Perkins is a defensive lineman from UT Martin. They offered a bunch of FCS guys and got several of them too. I think they've got to figure out who will be willing to come here. And yeah, they have budgets, just like the basketball program does. Now, that's not to say they're going and getting a bunch of nobodies with 0 offers. A lot of these players had other Power 4 schools that they were considering, but that has to be part of it. And it is the same approach that Wisconsin has taken on the basketball side. You just have to hope when you're making those moves that it pays off for you the next season.
What do you think of it? So they go get Jaden Ballard, right? And this is a little different. This is a player who was highly recruited. He was a top 100 prospect. He was the 3rd overall player in Ohio in his recruiting class. And right, the logic would be, well, he's at Ohio State and he can't crack the rotation or he can't get reps because there's just, so many special players at that position. That's a little bit of a different approach, but I think it's smart to probably try a little bit of both, right? Let's take guys from lower levels who are on their way up and maybe take a chance on a guy like Jaden Ballard, who's at a Division I school, but just can't quite break through. And maybe he could come here and find what he's been looking for.
Yeah, he spent 4 years at Ohio State and caught a total of 11 passes, and yet he was a top 15 wide receiver out of high school. You can say, well, the numbers may not be great, but he was in the best wide receiver room in the country. And so if he goes to a place like Wisconsin, he'll have an opportunity to thrive. Whether fair or not, I'm looking at the 2 portal guys they got specifically at wide receiver and thinking that's a really interesting comparison. And who will have more success next season? Obviously, Ballard's only got 1 year of eligibility. But the other guy that I'm pretty excited to see is the transfer they got from Idaho named Mark Hamper. And I'm working on a story about him right now that'll likely run at the end of this week. One of those guys who was completely overlooked out of high school. People didn't know what position he should play. They thought he should be a linebacker. He had no interest in playing on defense. Sacramento State offered him a scholarship as a tight end. He got 2 offers to play wide receiver. One of them was at Idaho. And as a redshirt freshman, he has almost 1,000 receiving yards and becomes a star. So they do like that productivity at lower levels, and I'll be real interested to see which one of those guys emerges next season as a key contributor for Wisconsin.
Yeah, and it's not like they need all of these guys to hit it. It seems like they're just, can they find 2 or 3 guys to be very good, maybe one guy to be great and really pop? I mean, they were in games this year where it's just like you feel like you're a player or 2 away. So I'm interested to see, and I like the variance, and I think as a writer who likes stories, like the comparison between someone coming from Idaho, someone coming from Ohio State with 2 very different stories. I think that's fun, and that's going to be something fun to follow as well. You've been following along their search for a couple position coaches. When we talked last, I think they hadn't hired the quarterbacks coach yet, and you posited that maybe it was because they were waiting on someone who was on staff who's currently in the playoff, right? Well, since then, they've promoted Kenny Guyton or changed. I don't know if it's a promotion from wide receivers coach to quarterbacks coach. And I was talking a little bit with Zach earlier today. It's a guy who I believe played when Luke Fickell was on staff at Ohio State. So there's some background there. Do you think they were looking at other candidates? They settled on Kenny Guyton. How do you think that hire came to pass?
I'm sure they looked at other candidates. Now, I don't know who it was and how long it took, but obviously they were that's such an important position. Ultimately, though, if whatever the first option was, assuming there were other options, didn't work out, I don't think it's a bad move at all with Kenny Guyton. I think he brings a lot of energy. And yes, he doesn't have a history as a coaching quarterback other than the last 2 weeks of this regular season when he handled the wide receivers and the quarterback. But he played quarterback at Ohio State, and he was there when Luke Fickell was there, including the year when Fickell was the interim coach in 2011. And Fickell has a great relationship with him dating to high school. So I think some people look at some of these coaching moves and question what the coach is doing, and you only know whether it's successful if it works out. But I think this is a real intriguing move, and obviously he made this decision because he felt it was so important to go to more of an NFL-type model where you're not splitting duties as both offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, because he felt like that wasn't particularly successful previously under Phil Longo.
Sure. And lastly, the playoff going on. I know I asked you last week if there was one game that you were excited about. You mentioned Oregon, Ohio State. What did you think of that result?
Shocking. Ohio State absolutely annihilated Oregon. I thought Ohio State would win just because they looked so good against Tennessee, and going undefeated is really hard, but the way they did it makes me think they're going to win the whole thing. Of course, if I actually knew, I'd take all this to Vegas and bet it all on the Buckeyes, which I'm not going to do.
Yeah, and it's college. It's college kids. You never know how they're going to react from a huge win to the next game. I don't know. I hope we get a couple of classics down the stretch. I know some of the games have been blowouts, but it's hard to watch Ohio State blow out Oregon and be like, well, the game wasn't good. Well, we got to watch this uber talented team flex their muscles in all sorts of different ways. So it was an enjoyable watch, at least for a couple of hours, even if it wasn't a close game. Well, Jesse, we look forward to your writing and your reporting about the Badgers basketball and football, and we'll talk next week. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Grant.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Last couple minutes of the Wisco Sports Show. Appreciate Tom Kelly from WIP, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. Mike Clemens going to be alongside Bill Michaels in about 40 minutes. He'll join tonight, bring the latest during the huddle from Green Bay. Comments from Matt LaFleur and comments from Jordan Love, injury designations and information, as much as we know, which Matt LaFleur was very intent on that being very little. He didn't want to share much today. Jordan Love is limited, and that's about all we got, which I guess is what I expected. That's been his playbook so far this season. Appreciate Jesse Temple as well. Ricardo Hallman coming back to the Badgers, which is about as big a news as they could get at a position of need unlike any other. They've lost so many players from the back end of the defense. So to get him back, just a huge development today. And it broke after I recorded that with Jesse, so we weren't able to talk about it, but I know Jesse would echo that sentiment as well. Let's take a call or two before we wrap things up. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Southside Scott.
Southside Scott. Hey, son of a gun. What's new?
I was actually listening to your show last night, and you were answering a bunch of questions. And I was calling about the gentleman that mentioned something about the elevator music.
Oh, yeah. Yep. During the commercial break on the live stream.
Right, yes. Is that the same music we hear when we're on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. That music does not sound like elevator music to me. It reminds me of a black and white movie where there's a lot of action, real fast action going on, and that's what you hear.
Elevator music is relaxing. Yeah, I would agree. The music, the filler music on hold or on the live stream, there's a little more juice to it.
Yeah, so it reminds me of an old black and white movie when they're going at and there's a lot of action going on, funny stuff, action going on. That's what it reminds me of.
Well, I would like to. It's not my favorite song in the world. Now it's just background noise. I hear it in my sleep. Hey, are your Broncos going to hang tough against the Bills? What do we expect on Sunday?
Oh, I want them to win, obviously, but
well, that's poor timing for your phone to cut out. That's all I'll say about that, Southside Scott. I think of all of the games this weekend, if we look at the NFL schedule, I mean, Packers Eagles is the crown jewel of the whole thing. That's the shooting match on Sunday afternoon. Two huge brands, prime time in the best time slot. It's the most viewed slot of the weekend, even more than Sunday Night Football, which will be Washington at Tampa Bay, and that'll be fun too. The big squeeze on Fox Sunday afternoon, two huge brands, lots of history outside. That'll be great. I think the game that Minnesota LA on Monday night is going to be pretty consequential because I think a lot of folks now are leaning in to see what Sam Darnold does. It's fascinating, right? Going into last week, I think a lot of us thought the Vikings were going to beat the Lions. I don't want to speak for you. I kind of thought they would. And I thought that now it's finally going to catch up. These defensive injuries going to catch up with the Lions. Sam Darnold's been awesome. And how are the Vikings going to make me? Kevin O'Connell's great. Brian Flores is great. There's so much talent, right? And then the game happened, and the Lions rolled them. And since Sunday, everything's completely flipped. Instead of thinking, well, the Lions are going to lose, and then the Lions might be getting bounced in the first round because their defense is in shambles, and here go the Vikings. I mean, why not the Vikings to go to the Super Bowl? And then the game on Sunday night happened. It's like, well, with how bad Sam Darnold looked, I don't expect the Vikings to win a playoff game. I think the Rams will get them. And now what's stopping the Lions from going to the Super Bowl? And I would kind of agree. It's crazy how, and we were talking about this earlier on in the show, Vagabond John mentioned this, like narratives in the NFL can flip because it's such a small sample size sport. And part of it is ridiculous. Like if the Packers beat the Eagles on Sunday, my original point was we are going to revise so many of our takes and the way that we feel about so many different things that have taken place this season, which is mostly unfair, but that's the way that it works, right? That's the way that it works. The NFL, one game completely flipped how everyone felt about Sam Darnold and the Vikings, and then Jared Goff, all of those defensive injuries and the Lions. It's crazy. One game, one result, just completely flipped it on its head. So I think after Packers-Eagles, which I think is the best game of the weekend anyways, the game that I'm most interested in is actually on Monday night with America's Booth. Buck and Aikman, and that's Minnesota at Los Angeles. I don't think the Rams have been as good as many people have been saying. I don't know that Stafford's looked that awesome. Cooper Kupp looks like he's over the hill. Nakua has been great. Jared Verse is a stud. Cam Curl and some of those young players on the Rams defense. The Rams defense is this year what the Packers offense was last year. All of these young guys hitting and making plays all over the place. I think the Rams could beat the Vikings, but that's not necessarily because the Rams have played amazing football. I just don't know, like, can I trust Sam Darnold? Now, we were just getting to the point where it's like, I think we could trust Sam Darnold. I think he's and then they scored 9 points. They couldn't score a touchdown. Maybe Sam Darnold, maybe that's the worst he's going to play. He bounces back and the Vikings win. And I don't know what the line is. I can check here. Or maybe Sam Darnold after last week is feeling the pressure. Like, man, if I don't play good in this next game, nobody's going to want me. No one's going to want to give me the big contract. And the Vikings, are favored by a point. That's what I thought. They're favored. They're a better team. And they've played better, even though they kind of stunk up the joint in Detroit last week. It's interesting to see, again, how a narrative completely flips because of one result. But that's why football's great. That's why we feel the need to watch all of these games. Because all of these games feel like they matter a lot. Unlike other sports. Now there's fewer games, so it's just structural. But one game feels like it could completely flip the fate of a player or a team or a player's upcoming contract. That's why it's fun. That's why we watch. So we'll talk more about this tomorrow. Mike Clemens will be there around 5:30 tomorrow night. We'll get the latest. One more day of practice, one more day in Green Bay. We'll hear a little bit from inside the locker room tomorrow. We didn't do so much. Bill Michaels Huddle coming up next. Dalton Wasserman, Mark Schofield, and Mike Clemens incoming over the next 2 hours. He'll also make his picks for this weekend. I'll talk to you tomorrow at 4.